and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. In this video, I will show you part 3 of the 6-part series for knitting your very first sock. This sock is a really simple and wonderful pattern that not only do I teach you, but I talk to you how to use it as sort of a recipe to make future socks. We have learned the cuff, we have learned the leg, and today we will learn how to do the heel flap. This is the preparation that we need to do in order to change directions in our knitting to get to the rest of our sock. This is a free pattern and you will find a link in the video description box right down there below. And while you're down there, smash that like button. Now, if you have not had a chance to work part 1 or part 2, please go ahead and review those videos and get your homework up to that point, and then come back here and watch this video because it is set up so that you're ready to go straight from part 2 right into part 3 and begin your knitting process. Now, if you're ready to jump in and make this heel flap, let's go ahead and take a look at what it is we are going to be creating. As you take a look at the sock I made, you can see that we have the cuff and the leg, and then we're down here to this section. So this section here is the one we're going to be working on. Actually, I'm going to take it out of this sock blocker so you can see it a little bit more flat. Ooh, if I don't drop the sock blocker. And if I were to open this up, and let's look at it as if we were going to be knitting on it. If I open this up just like so, here is my cuff, here is my leg, and then this section right here is my heel flap. This is what we're going to be working on. I chose to have a garter stitch edge on either side of the body of the stitches, and the stitches themselves, I chose a stitch pattern called the Eye of Partridge. Now, the Eye of Partridge is where you slip a stitch and then knit a stitch on one row, you purl back, and on the next row, you knit the stitches that you had slipped and you slip the stitches that you had knit. So of course there's that one purl row in between, but what that does is it creates a little bit extra thickness on the heel of the sock, making it a little bit more durable. You can also do just a basic sock heel that's where you would slip a stitch, knit the next stitch, and then continue on just keeping that column of stitches as slipped through the entire heel. I actually did that on a sample so I could show you. As you take a look down here at this one, so on this particular sock, here's my cuff, here's my leg, and on this one, instead of doing the Eye of Partridge, I made it so that the slip stitches were always in the same column, and it gives a different look, right? Okay, and this is a little bit thicker. Once you start working this, you will notice, obviously you can't tell over the video, but it is a little bit thicker than the rest of the sock, making it a little bit more durable. Same thing with the Eye of Partridge right here. It is a little bit thicker, making it more durable. This part of the sock will be more durable. Now, is the heel flap the only way to make a heel of a sock? Absolutely not. There's a lot of different ways to make the heel of the sock. But for this particular video and this particular pattern, that's how I decided to write this pattern up, is with the heel flap, because I feel like it's really easy and it fits really well into my idea of having this pattern as a recipe. Because the heel flap itself is worked over half the number of stitches that you cast on. So if you cast on 48, your heel flap will be worked over 24 stitches. If you cast on 64 stitches, your heel flap will be worked over 32 stitches. So it makes it really easy. If you were to adjust the number of stitches you happen to cast on, you know that if you're going to make a heel flap, it's worked over half the number of stitches that you are working with for the leg, right? And then as far as the length of the heel flap, or how many rows do, you do the same number of rows as you do stitches. So if we have 24 stitches, we'll do 24 rows. If we have 32 stitches, we'll do 32 rows. You see how that works? Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in and work on this heel flap. What I want to do here is I want to essentially put all of my stitches from needle 4 and all of my stitches from needle 1 onto one needle, because that will give me my total of 24 stitches that I want to work on back and forth for my example. So I can't just slip these over, right? Because my working yarn is right here. I need my working yarn to get down here to the end. So rather than using my 5th needle, I'm going to set that aside. And I'm just going to carry on working down this row using my 4th needle, so that way all of my stitches get onto one needle. And when I'm working my heel flap, I am only working these stitches on this one needle. Okay, I'm only going to be working back and forth. What that means is these other stitches that are on these other needles are just going to be hanging out. We aren't going to do anything else with them right now. We're just going to let those hang out. So now I have a total of 24 stitches on this one needle, and it's time to work in my Eye of Partridge pattern. So I will turn my work, and if you remember, I showed you that I have a garter stitch edge along the side of my Eye of Partridge heel. And I love using the garter stitch edge because I think it makes it really easy and a really big sort of bullseye for where you need to pick up stitches when we move into the gusset. So I really like this type of heel. This again is not the only way to do things, but it's the way we're working this particular pattern. Here at the start, because I want that garter stitch over these first 3 stitches, I will go ahead and I will knit these first 3 stitches. Notice I turned my work and I'm working back along that one needle that has the 24 stitches on it. If you're working with more stitches, obviously that one would have 32. Whatever your number is, it's the one needle that's in the back. Okay, so we're putting our heel. So I've knit those 3 stitches, and now I will purl down this row to the last 3 stitches. So I'm just purling all the way down to the last 3 stitches. Remember, I did stripes, that's why I have this join back here of the color change. I didn't tuck in my ends yet at this one because I wanted to wait till I got the heel flap done before I wove in those ends, but I've done all the others. When I get down here to the last 3 stitches, because I want the last 3 stitches to remain in garter stitch, I will knit them. To my last 3 stitches, I will go ahead and knit them. 2 and 3. I'm at the end. Go ahead and turn my work completely. It's just like I'm working with two needles, guys. I'm not doing it in the round. We're just working back and forth, okay? We're just working back and forth. We are not working in the round. So I turn my work and I'm going to work on top of these same stitches I just got done working with, but now I'm going to jump into my stitch pattern. I will knit my first 3 stitches, and then I will slip one, knit one, slip one, knit one, all the way down to my last 3 stitches. Then I'll knit those 3. We'll do that on this first row. You ready? So we'll knit our first 3. 1, 2, 3. Now with my yarn and back, I'm slipping as if to purl, slipping it over, and then I'm knitting my next stitch, slipping as if to purl, and knitting my next stitch, slip as if to purl, and knit my next stitch, slip as if to purl, knit my next stitch. You see how this goes? We're going to do this all the way down to the last 3 stitches. It's called the Eye of Partridge. What makes this thicker than the others is because as I slip those stitches, the yarn has to go from this stitch here behind the one I slipped to knit this one. So that slip stitch makes it feel like it's double thickness there because it not only has the stitch, but it has that slip to it. Then I go ahead and I will knit the last 3 stitches. Turn my work, not rotate, actually turn. So now I'm to the wrong side, right? I'm to the wrong side, working just on that one needle. Again, I'm ignoring these ones. They're just hanging out there. I will knit the first 3 stitches because I'm on the wrong side. And then I just purl down to the last 3 stitches. When I get to the slip stitch, I just purl it just like it's just normal. For those of you who have never done slip stitches before, it'll look like you dropped a stitch there. That's perfectly normal. That's what we want, okay? We're just purling all of these stitches, and it's perfectly normal to have that string behind the stitch that's on your needle. See what I mean? Like there's the stitch on my needle. Here's the string, the float. That's what we want. Totally normal. I'm coming all the way down to the last 3. And then I'll knit these 3. When I turn my work this time and work the right side row, I have to change up which stitches I'm going to slip, okay? If I keep doing it where I slip the first, or like I knit 3, then I slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, I'll get the column of just slip stitches like I showed you in the Mai Tai sock. But I want my slip stitches to alternate, and that's what gives me the Eye of Partridge look. So when I turn my work this time, let's go ahead and knit my first 3. So 1, 2, 3. Last row, I slipped this one. This time, I'm going to knit this one and slip this one. Knit, slip, knit, slip. If you get confused, take a look at your actual work. You'll be able to tell where your slip stitches are because they're nice and elongated. Okay, they look like they cover 2 rows. See how this one stitch here is the same height as those 2 stitches? It's because it was slipped. So I know if it was slipped before, it needs to be knit now. And this one, I have 2 distinct stitches next to an elongated, so this one needs to be slipped. That's one way you can tell if you start to get off track. Just pay attention to where the previous slip stitches are. And remember, you want to knit those. You'll also know when you get to the end, you're going to end with a slip stitch before you get to your knit 3. Got that? So now we want to repeat. We're going to turn our work. We'll purl this row, of course, keeping the garter stitch at the edges. On the next row, the next right side row, we will keep the garter stitch. Then we'll slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1. Then we'll turn, garter stitch, and purl. And then turn, garter stitch, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, slip 1. I just got done purling that row. I've turned my work, and now I'm getting ready to start my 3rd right side row, okay? So right here, this is where I begin my repeat. So I will slip this first one after I've done my garter stitch on the first 3. I slipped, and now I knit. I slip, and now I knit. I slip, and now I knit. And I would do this all the way down the row. Again, if I got confused, I could just find where the previous slip stitch is, and I just know that I have to make sure I knit that one, so that way it keeps the stitch pattern the way I want it to be in the Eye of Partridge. And I finish up with my knit 3. Now, keeping these edges in garter stitch, I want to show you something. Keeping these edges in garter stitch, that helps me a lot being able to count stitches, right? Because I know that it takes 2 rows to get a garter stitch sort of ridge here at the edges, okay? What's handy there is that will help you also keep track of the number of rows you have done on your heel flaps. That way you can make sure both of your socks have the same number of rows, okay? So that's one really useful thing with the garter stitch edging. The other useful thing is when we go to pick up stitches along this edge, we will be able to pick stitches up between each one of those ridges and keep things very consistent. Let me go ahead and show you one that's already worked up, the heel flap that's worked up to where you need to get to at the end of your homework, okay? So if we take a look at this one right here, this is the other, this is the mate to this one, and I've already worked up the Eye of Partridge. It's a little bit thicker. You can see on the inside, all my nice floats are all worked across there, and those floats are where I slipped stitches. I have my nice garter stitch edge all along the edge here. And if I go and I count these garter stitch ridges, I have 12 ridges. And I ended at the end of my right side row, okay? I want to make sure I end at the end of my right side row, and I have 12 ridges, and I have my nice Eye of Partridge. This is what yours will look like when you're done with your homework for this week. I've given you the number of stitches you need to use for your heel flap. Remember, it's half the number of stitches you cast on. I've told you how many rows you need to do for your heel flap. It's the same number of rows as you have stitches. I've also told you it's important that you finish on the right side row when you're done with your heel flap, right? But what is a heel flap? What is it you are creating? Let me show you. I put my partially finished sock on the sock blocker I've been showing you all along. And what I want you to see here is that these stitches up here, the ones that we haven't worked with when we made our heel flap, those are the top of our foot. So those stitches are the top of the foot. The heel flap itself right here, this is what is going down the back side of our heel. So this is what would be going up against your shoe, okay? This distance from right here of your leg down here is enabling us to then next week turn our heel and pick up stitches along the edge of this heel flap, working along all of these stitches all the way around, and that is what creates our gusset. And the gusset is where we have a larger number of stitches than what we did for our leg, okay? Because we need to make sure that our foot from this point to this point is able to actually fit into our sock. So by working our heel flap here, picking up stitches along our heel flap and then working stitches along the leg of our sock and then doing the same on this side, that allows us to have more stitches than what we cast on. And it will allow us to get this distance right here to be large enough for us to get our foot in the sock, okay? Once we pick up all those stitches, we will actually be decreasing down to get back to the same number of stitches as we had when we cast on. So that way we go from this large section here and then come down to the side of the foot. But you know, that's what we will learn next week. But I want you to have an idea of what it is you're doing, okay? So when you're creating this heel flap, this is the part of the sock you are actually creating. Not only is this functional because it gives us that extra length we need to be able to get the extra stitches to get this width that we need for our particular sock, but it also allows us to change directions in our knitting. We have been knitting in a tube straight down, and by doing this heel flap, we're now prepping ourselves to be able to change directions to make our sock flow the opposite direction, so that way we get an actual shape of a sock. So this is a really simple part, and if you are working on two socks, make sure you do it on both of them, and you will find this will go through really quickly this week, okay? And it's gonna feel really good. It feels really nice to go back to only working with 2 needles again, but then the actual thickness of the fabric feels really good, and I just really like it. So there you have it. That is week 3 of the My First Socks with Marley Bird. I hope you're having a great time. I can't wait to see your finished week 3. Make sure you share with me on social media. Just use hashtag MarleyBird, and I will be sure to check out your socks and smash your like button, because I really am enjoying watching all of your success out there, especially after week 2. Many of you decided to really just make it your own, and you're doing stripes, you're doing Fair Isle, you're doing slip stitches, you're doing all sorts of fun things, and it's fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch. I love watching your creativity and your skills grow as we make these really great socks. All right, so finish week 3. We will move on to week 4 and get ready to really see this sock take shape. And you'll be able to try it on at that point and really start to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm making this. All right, guys, I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. Everything you need to know about knitting or crochet can be found right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Learn with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.